Hey everybody, it's Patrick. It is Tuesday, and on Tuesdays I talk about long hair. Someone in a comment on one of my videos a couple weeks ago asked if I could make a video about what causes damaged hair. And that's a pretty big list. There are quite a number of things that can damage your hair. I thought that I would cover some of that, but mostly talk about what hair damage actually is and what we're talking about when we're talking about damaged hair. So if you are unaware of this, most people know this, when your hair grows out of the follicle, once it's basically out of your hair and out of your head and you can see it, your hair is a dead organism. This is just a collection of dead stuff that's hanging off your head. Once it's out of the follicle, you can't do very much to change it on a basic level, right? You can change it in some ways. You can change the way that it looks. You could dye it. You can curl it. You can cut it. You can tease it. You can do all sorts of things with it. But you can't really change the structure of your hair very much. Chemically, physically, your hair is basically, you've got what hair you have, and whatever you do past it growing out of your head is going to have some effect on it. And usually that effect weakens the hair in some way. And that weakness of your hair is basically damage. Now, you can do that on purpose. You can do that by accident. You can do that, not even you doing it. It can be something environmental that does that. So when you're talking about damage, you're basically just talking about the things that change the way your hair looks, right? Your hair doesn't serve really any other purpose. It maybe keeps you a little bit warm, keeps your top of your head from getting sunburned, but otherwise it's a cosmetic thing on your body that you're not protecting your hair against hair cancer, like your skin. If you're protecting your skin from damage, you're protecting your entire organism, right? So that you don't get skin cancer, you would put on SPF so that the skin does not become diseased. Your hair itself is not going to become diseased. The follicles can. You can get alopecia, all sorts of things. There are diseases that can attack the follicles. There are also other things that are happening with your body that can cause your hair to stop growing or to grow differently. If you've had chemotherapy, your hair can come back afterwards. It can stop growing because of the chemotherapy. It can come back in it can look completely different. So that's a long-winded way of saying when we're talking about hair damage, we're talking about things that make our hair look different than we want them to look. And so what do we consider damaged hair? Would be hair nowadays that looks dry, it looks very dry, that looks very frizzy. And by frizzy, I mean that it doesn't look smoothed out. It looks like there are lots of little tendrils that are coming out that fluff it up a little bit. I'm not talking about like a curly, I'm talking about like just frizz, like the sort of that halo effect. That is something that we don't like nowadays. Not necessarily in the past. People actually liked that look. And some people may still like to, when people tease their hair, that creates that look as well. Or that cause the hair to be unruly, so that it's not falling in the way we want it to, all of that. The things that can damage your hair are pretty basic. Damaged hair comes from, let's talk about, say, physical things. Physical things that can damage your hair. Your hair can split. At the end of your hair, if you think about it as just all one piece, if your hair breaks this way, this is one strand of hair, it breaks this way, what happens is it can then keep breaking all the way up the strand. That can be caused by any number of things, including just when you're washing your hair. When your hair is wet, it becomes more elastic, tends to pull, and when it pulls, it can pull not just in this direction, it pull this direction, and just split. So having wet hair and doing too much with your hair like that is difficult and bad for your hair. You can also just, when it's tangled, and if you have, say, a hairbrush and you are pulling it through your hair and you get to a knot, if you just yank your hair through a hairbrush, just like if you had I don't know, something on your sweater, again, something dead that you're wearing on your body, if you tried to pull at something, that's gonna split your hair like that as well. So that type of thing. We're talking about things where you're pulling your hair, where you're combing your hair, especially when it's wet. If you are not taking care of your hair in terms of haircuts, which is my big problem, a split end can, if it's just this big, it's not a big deal. But if you keep letting it pull and pull and pull and pull, eventually it's going to work its way up to the top of your head. And it's going to either cause it to become so weak that it'll fall out because, something, it's normally this wide and now you have two things this wide. These are half as strong. So that's going to cause it as well. So be careful for things that can physically damage your hair. Don't manipulate it too much. Don't brush it constantly. We used to be told back in the 70s to brush your hair 100 times, 60s and 70s, to make it stronger. That doesn't really work. And hats and tight hairbands. If you've got a hairband that's not protective, if you just have an elastic band, that is going to just grab the hairs, and when you pull your elastic band out, it's just going to pull those out as well. So that can damage the hair itself. The other things that you want to be aware of are chemical things that can, or environmental things that can damage your hair. Those things are a little bit more difficult to identify because it can be very specific to your hair. But the things that everybody's hair basically agrees on will be damaging are things like bleaching your hair. If you bleach your hair, you're basically taking the color. The color is not something that's inherent to your hair. Your hair is white when it grows out of your follicle. There's just a little basic injector that gives it the color. When you bleach it, in order to either give it another color or just keep it white, you're stripping that and you're pulling something out of your hair, and pulling anything out of something like that is going to be damaging. So you're going to want to condition it to try to add moisture back. Washing your hair actually does some damage because you are, once again, you have oils that naturally come in your hair, and it protects, it's a protectant. It also makes it smoother. It makes it easier for you to brush or whatever. As you wash your hair, you're stripping. Again, you're pulling something out of the hair itself, and you're changing the pH balance of your hair. So that's another thing that you want to be aware of. Doesn't mean you shouldn't wash your hair. Just make sure that when you're washing your hair, you're using something that when your hair is clean, it feels the way you want it to. And again, this is very particular to your hair type. You can also apply heat. Applying heat to your hair is very damaging to your hair as well. So there are protectant sprays that you can use. There are other protectant things, different types of shampoos and whatever, that actually protect you when you are heat drying it. I don't heat dry my hair, but if you're using a blow dryer, if you are straightening or curling your hair, that is going to damage it as well. And same thing for anything that chemically adds curl or removes curl, because you are changing the structure of your hair, and in both cases that causes damage in order to have that effect on your hair. So if you wanted to, if you want to change the color of your hair, if you want to change, if you want to remove the color from your hair, adding the color to your hair isn't quite as damaging if you're just doing it on its own. If you're using a vegetable dye, vegetable-based dye, to just add some blue into blonde hair or whatever, that's not really all that damaging, but it also doesn't last. So, but if you're removing color from your hair, if you're changing the texture or the spiral curliness, kinkiness, or whatever of your hair, that's going to damage it just on its own. If you're applying heat to your hair, and then anything environmental that does that as well. So if you're out in the hot sun, also the UV rays can damage your hair. So there's just a really large amount of things that can damage your hair. And I'm rambling a bit. We're getting towards 10 minutes. I apologize. So basically, when we're talking about damaging your hair, be aware of the things that can physically cause some sort of alteration in your hair, that you're pulling, you are brushing too hard, you are wearing things that constrict it, you're pulling at your hair, that will cause it to change in texture. If you are into styles where you tease, where you brush against the grain of your hair, that's going to damage it as well. Chemically, find a shampoo that makes your hair feel good and stick with it. Find a conditioner that works for your hair and stick with it. If you are making radical changes to the look and texture of your hair, be very aware that that is damaging. And something that I don't pay too much attention to, cuts. Keeping your hair healthy. If you find, like I do, like I have tremendous amount of split ends on the end, just cut those off, because you can't, I know there are a lot of claims out there that you can reverse damage to your hair through some sort of topical treatment. It really doesn't work all that much. It doesn't really work that way, and you really do want to pay attention to that. So if you have split ends, there is no shampoo, there is no oil, there is no anything that's going to take those split ends and put them right back together. It just doesn't happen. So protect your hair, be good to your hair. If you know George, be good to self. And I will see you again next week. I think next week is March. Holy crap. So I'll probably be back with a 26-month update, and maybe I'll get a trim before then. If you've been watching my updates lately, you'll know that probably won't happen. Anyway, have a good day.